This house in Mount Vernon, Washington is listed at $385,000, and we're going to be talking about what it would look like to buy this house if you make $80,000 a year. We'll look at what your monthly payment might be, how much cash you'll need to bring all into the deal, and if you'd be able to qualify for this monthly payment if you're making around $80,000 a year. Would this be doable? We're going to walk through two different quotes here. We will look at one quote where you are putting 5% down, which, just to give you a ballpark, you would have to bring around $30,000 to do that at this price point. And then we'll look at one quote where you are putting 10% down, and that is closer to $50,000. So even if you know kind of which one you'll be closer to right now, hopefully it'll be helpful to look at both quotes just so you can learn a little bit more about how the pricing is impacted and how it all works along the way to get a better idea of what your numbers actually might be. This is a real quote that we will look at. My name is Landon Buto, and I work with Cleveland Street Mortgage. We are based in Bothell, Washington. We're a local mortgage broker, and this is a real quote that we're looking at, but it's not an advertisement. It's not an exact number that you're going to end up with, but hopefully it'll give you a better picture of what your numbers might look like and what the process might look like than you might get from just an online calculator. So let's look at the numbers on the quote. All right, in order to create this quote, I had to make a few assumptions about who you are as a home buyer, because your pricing and your interest rate and all that is dependent on more than just your down payment. It's dependent on several factors, but two of the important ones are your credit score. So I'm assuming a credit score of 740. If you're close to that, then it's going to be similar. If you're significantly below that, if you're down in the 600s, and especially if you're below 620, then it probably will be significantly different. But if you're in this ballpark of 700s, then it's going to be pretty similar. And then I'm also assuming that you are a first-time home buyer. And the reason that matters is primarily for mortgage insurance. If you're not a first-time home buyer here and you are putting less than 20% down and getting mortgage insurance, then your mortgage insurance is probably going to be a good bit more than this. Mortgage insurance can range from, as you see it is here, from as low as like $50 a month, $18 a month, whatever. Just depends, up to $200, $300 a month. It depends on a lot of different things, but because I'm assuming you're a first-time home buyer here, it gets you access to a certain program where your mortgage insurance is, they reduce the mortgage insurance to make homeownership more attainable for first-time home buyers. If you are not a first-time home buyer, then that's going to be the primary area of impact. You might see an impact in your interest rate slightly, but probably not, and not much at all if you do. So let's look at the two quotes here. On the left is the 5% down scenario, and on the right is the 10% down scenario. Let's walk through the numbers on the 5% down scenario. Total monthly payment is $2,995, just barely south of $3,000. And here are the four different components that make up that monthly payment. One of those is homeowner's insurance, and I'm estimating $125 a month. That will vary. It depends on your insurance provider, and it depends on how much coverage you're getting. But this is a pretty good estimate for that ballpark. I would actually guess probably a little bit lower for this price point, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what your homeowner's insurance might look like. Taxes, this is, again, so typically I can grab the exact number and put it into the quote. For this one, I could, because counties will post the tax amount on their website. You can see it on Zillow, you can see an estimate on Zillow, but that's not always 100% correct. So I like to grab the exact number from the county website. However, this time the county website didn't have this particular property posted that I could find, so I estimated at a pretty reasonable rate. And it may be a little bit high, but we are using taxes of $321 per month. I just used 1% of the purchase price. And then mortgage insurance, $85 a month in this scenario. And mortgage insurance is determined by how much you put down. It's determined by your risk profile, really, which is it's a function of how much you put down, how much the loan amount is, what your credit score is, if you have any history of defaults, things like that. So this is really a pretty low number for mortgage insurance because it's a low loan amount and you have a decent credit score, and we're in a good program, a good loan program that offers low mortgage insurance. And then the last component is principal and interest, and that is just a function of the loan amount, which is $365,750, and the interest rate of 7.125. Again, not an advertisement for this rate. This isn't the exact rate you'll get, but I'm making this video on April 8th, and that will give you a pretty good idea of where we're at here at the start of April as far as interest rates. This section right here, I always like to point out points or credit. This is technically $48 a month, or not a month, $48 upfront of points. Points are a fee you can pay up front in order to lock in a lower interest rate. You tell the lender, I'll give you a little bit more money, a chunk of change up front, if you let me lock in a lower interest rate. There are various reasons you might do that. We don't recommend it by default. If there's a good reason, there are a lot of good reasons to do it. So if you have a good reason to do it, we can talk about that, we can strategize, but we don't recommend it just to do it. So $48 a month, the reason that's 48 and not 0 is, and the same is true over here, 45 and not 0, is because lenders price their rates according to rate increments. So usually according to like eighth point increments, 7.000, 7.125, 7.25, 7.375, and so on, and they just tell you on any given day how much it's going to cost or credit in order to get that interest rate. And credit is the reverse of points. It's where you tell the lender, I will take a higher interest rate if you will cover some of my closing costs up front. Usually it takes a few $1,000s to make any difference on the interest rate. It depends on the timing in the market, but typically it takes a few $1,000s of points or credit to have any impact on the interest rate. So this $48 is pretty close to 0. So basically not paying any points to get this interest rate. Other closing costs, $10,744. That's just all the beyond your down payment, you're going to have to pay some costs in order to get the house and in order to get the loan. You have to pay the parties involved in helping you get the loan. You have to pay fees involved in making the transaction happen. And then the other component is you have to pay prepaids in your closing costs. And prepaids are costs you're going to be paying on an ongoing basis as part of your mortgage. They're part of this. They're part of your mortgage that you're agreeing to pay on a regular basis. But you have to put some cash into escrow ahead of time in order to cover some of your ongoing costs. So some of those prepaids go into escrow ahead of time with other closing costs. So what that means is this other closing costs plus your down payment of 5% added together, you're going to have to bring $31,151 to the table. Technically 5% down is not the lowest you could go. Sometimes if you're qualified, you can go 3% down. There's even some programs with tons of caveats typically, but some programs that have 1% down or 0% down. But broadly speaking, for conventional loans, 3% down is usually available. But if you can hit 5% down, that improves your pricing over 3% down typically. Again, ask questions when you actually come to get the loan because there are very few universals, but that's why I'm pricing it out here at 5%. Let's look at the 10% down scenario. Monthly payment is $2,841. And that's made of these 4 different components. You can see it's, 150 less-ish. So homeowner's insurance is still the same. Taxes are still the same because those are a function of the house. The house has not changed. The loan structure has changed, but these are dependent on the house, not the loan structure. Mortgage insurance, on the other hand, is dependent on the loan structure. So that is $61 a month because you are now less of a risk because you hit 10% down and it's a smaller loan amount. So those are obviously related, but showing that you can hit 10% down over just the very small 5% down shows the lender you're less of a risk. And then also you've reduced the loan amount for them, which provides less of a risk that needs to be covered. And then the last component is principal and interest, which is a function, again, of your loan amount, $346,500, and your interest rate. In this case, going from 5% to 10% down because of this loan program and the timing in the market and all that did not change your interest rate. Sometimes it will. But what it did change is obviously your mortgage insurance, and it reduced the loan amount on which you are paying interest. Again, basically 0 points. Sorry, not crossing that out. Basically 0 points, $45 in points. Points are a fee you can pay up front to get a lower interest rate. So this would go into your closing costs. So you tell the lender up front, I'll give you a little cash up front if you let me lock in a lower interest rate. If you want more details on that and you skipped this section, come back here where I was talking about it over here. Lender fee, closing costs of $10,654. So closing costs generally, we estimate, just doing the mental math in our head, probably $11,000-$12,000 in the general Seattle area at that first-time home buyer price point. Obviously, this is a little bit below that first-time home buyer price point at $385 and a smaller loan amount. So this is going to come down. Closing costs is a function of your loan amount and your purchase price, and several other things, but those are kind of the key things. So if you have much bigger loan amount, much bigger purchase price, this number is going to be bigger. But at this price point, this is a pretty good estimate for what you might be looking at. If you want to know more about what's involved in closing costs and you skip to this section, come back here. So when you add your closing costs and your down payment together, the cash you're going to have to bring all in to the 10% down scenario is $50,309. So 10% down on a $385 purchase price is $38,000. So that's your $38,500 down payment plus your closing costs brings you to $50,309 here. So that's the cash all in that you're going to have available. Would you be able to qualify for this loan if you are making $80,000 a year? So let's talk about what qualifying looks like. How do lenders decide if you can qualify for a loan? What they do is they look at, for conventional loans specifically, and for FHA it's very similar. The calculation is very similar. The process is very similar. The numbers, the final numbers, are slightly different, but that's a nuance I'm not going to get into here. So for conventional specifically, they look at what your DTI, your debt to income ratio. And your debt to income ratio is your total monthly debts over your gross monthly income. Total monthly debts are your new housing payment that you're trying to take on. So they look at this number and say, let's add this to any other monthly debts that you have. Credit card debt, student loan debt, car debt, any other debts that you have, add that all together with your new housing payment and divide that by your gross monthly income, which is your income before taxes. And let's see if that number is less than 50%. If it is less than 50%, for the most part, the lender will give you the loan. They'll let you that you will qualify for the loan. They'll let you take that on. If it is more than 50%, you will not qualify. Now, one important piece of this is how your income is determined. If you are paid salary, how your income is determined is very straightforward. They pretty much just use your salary. Sometimes they'll even be able to use maybe some of your bonus or other things that you have included in your compensation package. However, if you are paid in other pay structures, if you are largely paid on commission, if you are self-employed, or if you work variable hours where you work 30 hours here one week, 50 hours the next week, and so on, then the way that this number is determined is pretty rigid, and it's not super intuitive. There are certain rules that your income has to meet in order to count as income for usable income here. And so just be mindful of that. You will probably want to talk to a lender, a loan officer on the earlier side, if that's you, to try and get a sense of what this number might be and whether you might be able to qualify for, how much you might be able to qualify for. So if this is the rule, if this is the case, if you make $80,000 a year, would you be able to qualify for this? Well, $80,000 a year is, I think, $6,666. Yeah, $80,000 a year this number is $6,666 per month. And so if you look at these and you say, is this going to be more than 50% of this? Now, assuming you have no other debts. If you have no other debts and you look at this and you look at $80,000 a year, well, you're going to be able to qualify for this because both of these are less than 50% of your gross monthly income. So you just need to take this number, you need to take your income divided by 12, see what that monthly rate is, and see if it is more than twice what either of these monthly payments is, and you'll be able to see if you would qualify for this monthly payment. So $80,000 a year, yes, you would be able to qualify for these. Budgeting wise, affordability wise, that's not what I'm talking about here. That's up to you. That's a budgeting rule. You can figure out what you're comfortable with, how much of a monthly payment you're comfortable with. But in terms of if you come and you have this much qualifying income, $80,000 a year of qualifying income, and that could be 40 of yours, 40 of your spouse's, 50 of yours, 30 of your spouse's, as long as it all qualifies, given the rules we just talked about, then, and you're both on the loan, then you would qualify for this at $80,000 a year. If you want to get a quote that's more precise, more specific to the house that you are looking at, feel free to reach out to us. If you want to get a look at your income or just start to ask questions, feel free to reach out to us. All our contact information is in the description below. I work closely with my dad who owns Cleveland Street Mortgage, and he's been doing this for almost 30 years and just has a ton of experience. If you want to get a sense of what people's experiences working with us have been like, you can go to our website linked below, check out reviews there, and see if you think the process would make sense with us. There's also videos linked in the description where you'll get a sense of what it's like to work with us, what our process is like, what it's like to get a loan with Cleveland Street Mortgage. So you can check out those videos linked there. I'd encourage you to watch those because who your lender, who you work with, makes a big impact on your experience. So you want to make sure it's a good fit. Check out those videos, and if it looks like a good fit for you, feel free to reach out to us. We work in Washington and Idaho. We do loans in Washington and Idaho, and we'd love to help you get a loan on a house you're looking at there.